Changming smiled and nodded. He bowed deeply to Chan Qingyi. No need to be so polite. Follow me. Chan Qingyi directly issued an invitation. Changming nodded repeatedly in agreement, then followed closely behind. On the side, Bing Xinyan's eyes were shining at this moment, filled with surprise and anticipation. The ancient forebears once said that after reaching a certain level of cultivation, every gesture and movement hides endless profound principles and hidden truths. Previously, she was almost deeply immersed in watching Senior Ye's game of chess. If it were calligraphy or painting, what kind of profound principles and hidden truths would they contain? Soon, Chan Qingyi arrived with Changming at the small courtyard behind the grocery store. After that, they went straight to the stone table where painting usually sat. Since Changming came bearing generous gifts, he felt embarrassed to show the calligraphy he had written casually before. He decided to write a new piece to present in person. Upon seeing this, Bing Xinyan hesitated briefly and quickly said, "Mr. Yi, let me help you grind the ink." Chan Qingyi nodded with a smile, then looked at the delighted Changming. After a moment of consideration, he spoke. "The bright moon emerges from the Tian Shan, drifting in the boundless ocean of clouds. How do you feel about this sentence?" Changming was stunned for a moment. In his mind appeared, "A radiant moon ascends from the celestial mountains, with clouds stretching boundlessly like surging waves." My goodness, such a magnificent description that effortlessly conveys a fascinating and enchanting celestial scene. It cannot be wrong. The person in front of me is the esteemed Grandmaster who comes from the celestial heights. He nodded quickly at the mention of this. Even the look in his eyes towards Chan Qingyi was filled with respect. At the same time, Bing Xinyan, who was grinding ink, was also surprised. Is this something a person said? It's like magic coming out of their mouth. Next, Chan Qingyi smiled faintly at the corner of his mouth. He then dipped his brush in ink and started to write slowly. At that moment, Bing Xinyan, who was grinding ink, quietly stopped. Changming, with a big smile on his face, also gradually stiffened. The two of them held their breath and focused intently, staring fixedly at Chan Qingyi, on the brush in his hand. They were eager to witness with their own eyes how a transcendent being of unrivaled skill like Senior Yi would integrate profound principles and hidden truths into calligraphy. Perhaps this would be a once-in-a-lifetime fortuitous encounter and stroke of good fortune in their lives. Meanwhile, Chan Qingyi, holding the wolf hairbrush, finally made a move. Since arriving in this world of cultivate immortality, this is the first time he has created under the gaze of others. At the same time, in order to prove his own accomplishments in calligraphy, he appeared very serious and focused before starting to write. Perhaps he was too engrossed. He seemed to have forgotten everything, with his mind and spirit completely immersed in the writing. The bright moon emerges from the Tian Shan, swiftly writing. In the blink of an eye, 5 wild cursive calligraphy in ancient style were completed in one go. But just as he was about to pick up the brush again, a sudden vision appeared behind him. Numerous immortal mountains rose into the air, with towering peaks stretching endlessly. Among them, ancient cypresses stood tall, and precious herbs emitted colorful radiance. As the gentle breeze passed by, the swirling clouds and mist among the mountains surged and rolled, creating a grand and majestic atmosphere that gave people a sense of being on the scene. In the blink of an eye, a bright moon slowly rose from the deep sea of clouds at the top of the mountains. Drifting in the boundless ocean of clouds, Chan Qingyi once again quickly wrote with his pen, making people feel as if they were standing at the top of the mountains in an instant. Faced with the towering immortal mountains, vast moon, and sea of clouds, one cannot help but feel their mind and spirit stirring. The state of mind is clear and transparent. This time, the gentle breeze brushes the face. No, this time it's not a gentle breeze. And it is countless sword spirits brushing against the face. At the same time, the vast sea of clouds transforms into the essence of the sword. Some essence of the sword is majestic and surging, rolling and flying. Some are gentle and smooth, like a small bridge over flowing water. At this moment, Chan Qingyi finally finished signing his name. He nodded in satisfaction. But as soon as he raised his head, he saw Bingxin Yin and Changming Li, both with pale faces and vacant eyes, as if they had lost their minds. What's going on? Seeing this scene, Chan Qingyi couldn't help but furrow his brow. Why are people in this world so strange? Especially this Bingxin Yin. She looks pretty clever, but plays chess like a block of wood. Now, she even looks silly trying to read a calligraphy model. And the disciple of the sacred land of metaphysics. He looks quite handsome and elegant. But when faced with himself, he acts like a servant. He even looks silly trying to read a calligraphy model. Woof, woof, woof. At this moment, a dog's bark is heard. Shadow Monarch appears in the courtyard with a big smile on his face and wagging his tail. At the same time, Bingxin Yin and Changming Li forcibly recalled their mind and spirit, taking a sharp breath. It's worth mentioning that just now, they almost had their minds and spirits crushed by the dreadful essence of the sword. It was a close call. These two youngsters are really reckless. The master's calligraphy contains endless mysteries. Even I, the king, don't dare to sneak a peek on ordinary days. Yet you openly gazed at it. Thinking of this, the Shadow Monarch couldn't help but curl his lips sarcastically and cast a contemptuous glance at the two. On the side, Chan Qingyi saw that they had finally snapped out of it and couldn't help but laugh, saying, "Are you two all right?" Bingxin Yin and Changming Li glanced at each other, then nodded cautiously. Chan Qingyi then asked Changming Li, "Are you satisfied with this calligraphy?" Changming Li was taken aback, then nodded quickly. It seemed that the esteemed Grandmaster was going to give him this piece of calligraphy containing the infinite profound truth of the sword path. This was truly a stroke of great luck and good fortune. Chan Qingyi nodded. "In that case, since it's getting late, I won't help you mount it. You can take it back and mount it yourself." Changming thanked Senior for the gift. Changming Li first bowed deeply to Chan Qingyi respectfully. Then, he carefully rolled up the calligraphy, which had dried. "Senior." Changming will take his leave now. After tidying up the calligraphy, Changming Li bowed again, and then turned around to leave without haste. Seeing that he finally left, Chan Qingyi also breathed a sigh of relief. It has been a long time since he had indulged in meat dishes. Today, he bought 2 pounds of pork belly. At most, it will be enough for him and Bingxin Yin to eat. Watching Changming Li behave so deferentially towards oneself. In case one modestly gives way, the other is stubborn. They just stick around shamelessly. What should be done in this situation? Can't just drive them away, right? On the other hand, after Changming Li walked out upon town, the pale and handsome face was instantly filled with joy. I can't believe this esteemed Grandmaster who came from the celestial heights. Turns out he is so graceful and amiable. Such a state of mind really makes people feel ashamed. He tremblingly took out the calligraphy from his arms, and looked at it over and over again. The esteemed Grandmaster gave me such a calligraphy. There must be a profound meaning behind it. After a brief contemplation, a glint flashed in the eyes of Changming Li. He lightly tapped his forehead and laughed. "This calligraphy contains so much of the profound truth of the sword path. Could it be that the esteemed Grandmaster wants me to cultivate the path of the sword from now on?" No mistake. It must be so. No wonder my cultivation level has been stagnant for all these years. So the problem actually lies here. Changming Li's face showed a hint of determination. He carefully tucked the calligraphy back into his arms. Then he leaped into the air, transforming into a rainbow light heading directly towards Mount Taishan. About half a traditional time later, a beam of rainbow light fell on the top of Mount Taishan. However, he did not go to Changming Hall. Instead, he went straight to the palace of the Great Profound. "It is Changming. What brings you to visit me, master?" Chan Xian the Immortal saw Changming Li hurrying over. A kind smile appeared on his face. Changming Li bowed respectfully. He spoke in a serious tone. "Mentor, the disciple has come to discuss an important matter with you." Chan Xian the Immortal picked up his beard and looked at Changming Li, shaking his head with a smile. "I understand what you mean, disciple. Are you concerned about my relationship with Wu Shuang, the Saintess cultivator? Chang Mingli shook his head. Report to Mentor. It's not about that. Chan Xian the Immortal nodded in relief. Then, what brings you here? Chang Mingli didn't hesitate. Mentor, disciple has decided to revise the path of the sword starting today. What? Upon hearing this, Chan Xian the Immortal's face immediately changed. What a joke. A saint cultivator like you should be practicing the highest scripture of metaphysics, the sacred land of metaphysics, instead of revising the path of the sword. If this news spreads, you will surely be mocked by others. At this point, Chan Xian the Immortal looked at Chang Mingli's eyes. There was a subtle change that occurred unconsciously. He couldn't help but feel uneasy about the conflict with the Saintess cultivator. Now he has to focus on cultivating the path of the sword. It seems that this matter has had quite an impact on him. Do not get discouraged. I understand your thoughts, my disciple. Chan Xian the Immortal patted Chang Mingli's shoulder and said with a heavy tone, Now that things have come to this point, there are some things that I will not hide from you anymore. Mentor, Chang Mingli frowned. He was about to speak. Chan Xian the Immortal raised his hand to interrupt. Chang Ming, you are not aware of something. The senior who lives in seclusion in Pond Town once promised Wu Shuang to offer her guidance. That senior may have a great connection with our sacred land of metaphysics. And if things go as expected, our every move in the sacred land of metaphysics is under that senior's surveillance. That's why I had to resort to this measure. Do you understand my intentions now? Chang Mingli gazed steadily at Chan Xian the Immortal in front of him, who treated him like a father figure. Unconsciously, his eyes became a bit moist. On the gentle face of Chan Xian the Immortal, a kind smile appeared. He solemnly said, Chang Ming, rest assured. With your exquisite twin's elemental spiritual root, no one can shake your identity as a saint cultivator. In the future, only you can become the saint master of the sacred land of metaphysics. Chang Mingli nodded heavily. After a moment of hesitation, he whispered, Mentor, in fact, disciple, I also met that senior today in Pond Town. What? Chan Xian the Immortal couldn't help but change his face upon hearing this. His gaze sharpened as he trembled and said, Chang Ming, you have already secretly met that senior. Chang Mingli nodded in acknowledgement without denying it. Confused, Chan Xian the Immortal glared angrily, disappointment evident in his expression. Chang Ming, oh Chang Ming, you are truly too reckless. What kind of existence is that senior really? It's nothing like what you can imagine. Since he chose to live in seclusion in Pond Town, it's obvious he doesn't want to be disturbed. But you, on the other hand, actually went ahead to visit without authorization. You even kept it a secret from your master. You should know, if you happen to offend that senior in any way, it might bring disaster to the entire sacred land of metaphysics. At this point, Chan Xian the Immortal couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. After a moment of hesitation, he looked at Chang Mingli and asked, Have you ever met that senior? Just feeling a ringing in my head. Chang Mingli finally came to his senses. He nodded quickly. Who knew he was about to speak when he was abruptly interrupted by a worried-looking Chan Xian the Immortal. What did the senior say? What did he do to you? Mentor, the senior gave me a piece of calligraphy that contains the endless profound truth of the sword path. This time, Chang Mingli was afraid of being interrupted by Chan Xian the Immortal, so he directly mentioned the key point of the issue. At the same time, he had a thought and took out the piece of calligraphy that Chan Qingyi had given to him from his bosom. Chan Xian the Immortal's gaze suddenly became sharp. A serious expression appeared on his old face. However, when he saw the unframed calligraphy, the seriousness on his face instantly intensified. It could also be said to be somewhat breathtaking. You should know that the calligraphy by Wu Shuang Lu is exquisitely framed. On the other hand, Chang Mingli's calligraphy has no framing at all. This is enough to show the attitude of that senior towards Chang Mingli. Notice these details. Chan Xian the Immortal's face immediately turned cold. A chill rose in his heart. That was a supreme existence. If it were indeed his own transcendence to the celestial heights, the esteemed Grandmaster, Perhaps just a few words could ruin his status as a Saint Master. Changming, is this really a gift from that senior? Chan Xian the Immortal asked coldly. Reporting to Minner, it is indeed a gift from that senior. Changming Li squeezed out a faint smile of despair and nodded gently. Upon hearing this, Chan Xian the Immortal slowly opened the calligraphy scroll that had been rolled up into a tube. The bright moon emerges from the Tian Shan, drifting in the boundless ocean of clouds. Upon seeing these 10 dragons dancing and phoenixes frolicking, the majestic and vibrant wild cursive calligraphy in ancient style, Chan Xian the Immortal's face immediately changed drastically. His mind and spirit were suddenly drawn into it. In an instant, he seemed to be standing at the summit of a mountain range, facing the towering immortal peaks, vast moonlit clouds. Unconsciously, Chan Xian the Immortal just watched like that for almost the time of a burning incense stick. Even for a strong cultivator like him who overlooks all beings, he couldn't help but take a cold breath. In a simple piece of calligraphy, it's as if there is another universe within. And Chan Xian the Immortal, who is well versed in the art of creation, naturally can comprehend things in the calligraphy that are beyond the reach of younger generations like Changming Li. This senior is indeed a supreme being. It's unimaginable that he could incorporate the ultimate, the profound truth of the sword path so thoroughly into the calligraphy. It's incredible. It's just too unbelievable. He instantly showed a look of joy on his face, constantly exclaiming in a loud voice. Changming Li finally saw a smile on Minter's face, and couldn't help but also smile. Minter, that senior gave me such calligraphy. The profound meaning in it has already been understood by the disciple. So, this is also why the disciple must fundamentally revise the path of the sword. Haha, profound meaning. Chan Xian the Immortal's face turned cold. With a wave of his long sleeve, he said in a low voice, Changming, you just need to remember that as a saint cultivator of the sacred land of metaphysics, you can only cultivate the highest scripture of our sect. Remember, do not let today's incident repeat itself. Otherwise, I will be very disappointed as your teacher. Why? There is so much of the profound truth of the sword path hidden in this calligraphy. Obviously, that senior felt that my talent on the path of the sword surpasses others. Could it be a misunderstanding? Changming Li blinked, his face showing a sense of confusion. Chan Xian the Immortal glanced at him, and spoke ambiguously after a long pause. Changming, although you are talented, you still need to carefully consider some interpersonal matters and observe more details. You need to learn to perceive the whole from the minutiae, especially when dealing with some supreme beings. He shook his hand while talking, gesturing towards the unframed calligraphy on the wall. Unconsciously, the sun had set in the west. The twilight painted the whole Mount Taishan with a reddish hue. With a rumble, at this moment, a terrifying wave suddenly emanated from the direction of the sword spirit peak. Shortly after, a beam of thick divine light soared into the sky. Accompanied by a grand momentum, a deafening sound suddenly came from the direction of the sword spirit peak. The entire sacred land of metaphysics trembled incessantly. Everyone looked towards the sword spirit peak. Oh my goodness! Such a grand momentum, and divine light soaring into the sky. If nothing unexpected happens, it should be that the first Cherry Yuanjian disciple brother of the Sword Spirit Peak has finally had a breakthrough. It's truly cause for celebration. The cultivation level of Yuanjian disciple brother has been stagnant for over 1,000 years. It's unexpected that today he can achieve a breakthrough. That's not right. I remember it very clearly. The old Saint Master once said that Yuanjian disciple brother would need at least 2,000 years to step into the divine transcendence stage. So, what he must have obtained a great fortuitous encounter, allowing him to break through ahead of time. Great fortuitous encounter. What kind of fortuitous encounter could it be to let Yuanjian disciple brother shorten the time to step into the divine transcendence stage by half? No, I need to go inquire about this. I'll go too. The senior executives of the sacred land of metaphysics exchanged brief greetings, and then transformed into streaks of rainbow light, flying towards the direction of Sword Spirit Peak. Outside the palace of the Great Profound at this moment, Chan Xian the Immortal and Changming Li also turned their heads to look in the direction of Sword Spirit Peak. Congratulations. It seems that Yuan Jian disciple brother has gained some insights from that calligraphy. This breakthrough has enabled him to enter the divine transcendent stage. Chaxian the immortal, who knows the truth, is filled with joy on his face. Calligraphy. Changming suddenly came to his senses. Now I understand. So the senior from Pond Town as well gave Wuxuanlu a piece of calligraphy. At the same time, his mind wandered. Just now, Changxian the immortal gestured towards that piece of calligraphy to him. Is there a huge contrast between the two calligraphies? In other words, the senior looked down on him a bit. This made Minter feel dissatisfied with him. It can't be wrong. It must be like this. Thinking of this, Changming couldn't help but feel a hint of sadness in his heart. At the same time, it also made him doubt whether his cultivation talent really couldn't compare to Wuxuanlu's. After pondering for a moment, he showed a look of sadness. He bowed deeply to Changxian the immortal. Minter, the disciple knows that he was wrong. Upon hearing the sound, Changxian the immortal withdrew his gaze. He turned to look at Changming and nodded. Very well. During this time, you shall stay in Changming Hall to reflect carefully. Changming respectfully replied. Disciple obeys. He then turned and left. The setting sun cast a long shadow of him, giving a sense of desolation and decline. Changxian the immortal watched Changming back, couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Then, he too turned into a rainbow and flew towards Sword Spirit Peak. Soon, the area outside Sword Spirit Peak's hall was packed with people. All the spiritual Sword Peak disciples gathered on the square below the high platform. And on the high platform, the entire high-level figures of the sacred land of metaphysics were also standing there. Of course, except for some elders, who were in seclusion, and a few remaining grand elders. Nearly half of the traditional time has passed. When the vision-shrouding Sword One Hall completely dissipates, the door is finally opened. Shortly after, Yuan Jin the Immortal, who just broke through, walked out. Disciples respectfully congratulate Minter on successfully breaking through. In an instant, nearly 100 disciples from Sword Spirit Peak kneel down in unison on the square below. The noise is deafening. Ha ha ha. Congratulations to Brother Yuanjian disciple. Congratulations on successfully breaking through. You have finally entered the divine transcendent stage. Many high-level figures from the sacred land of metaphysics are also offering their congratulations. Yuanjian the immortal looks radiant. His face is full of joy. He laughs and returns the gesture respectfully. Ha ha ha. Thank you, all brother disciples. The senior members exchanged glances. Jiuju the immortal spoke up first to inquire. Brother Yuanjian? The Saint Master once speculated that it would take at least 2,000 years for you to reach the divine transcendence stage. However, you've successfully broken through in less than 1,000 years. Did you encounter some fortuitous encounter? Yuanjian the immortal nodded involuntarily upon hearing this. He smiled as he stroked his beard and said, Brother Jiuju, since you've asked, and all our fellow disciples are here, I won't keep it a secret any longer. A few days ago, Wuxuang brought back a piece of calligraphy from Pond Town, containing many profound truths of the sword path. It was through my insights gained from this calligraphy that I was able to break through the shackles and successfully enter the divine transcendence stage. Upon hearing about the calligraphy from Pond Town, the senior members present all frowned, and their faces showed seriousness. Just by gaining insights into the profound truth of the sword path contained in the calligraphy, one could directly enter the divine transcendence stage. This calligraphy must truly be extraordinary. By the way, Pond Town. Could it be that this calligraphy is created by the senior residing in Pond Town? If that is the case, it means that the senior is a great master of the path of the sword. It must be true. It has to be like this. At this moment, Yuanjian the immortal suddenly shook his head and sighed. When the crowd saw this, their faces changed rapidly. Even Changxian the immortal couldn't help but furrow his brow slightly. A look of hesitation appeared on his face. What's going on again? How can you still be shaking your head and sighing when you have already entered the divine transcendence stage? Yuanjin the immortal raised his eyebrows and exhaled, saying, Fellow brother disciples, I won't hide it from you. I have dull aptitude. I just barely grasped the surface of the profound truth of the sword path in that calligraphy. What? It took some time for the various high-level figures in the sacred land of metaphysics to feel nervous upon hearing this. Just barely grasped the surface and already had a breakthrough. If everyone fully comprehends it, wouldn't they ascend during the day? Also, Yuanjin the immortal looks sincere and doesn't seem to be exaggerating. At this point, Immortal Qingye furrowed his brow and spoke up. Immortal Yuanjin, disciple brother, if you don't mind, could you let us take a look at that calligraphy? Yes, Immortal Yuanjin, disciple brother, just let us take a look. Someone gazed at Immortal Yuanjin with imploring eyes, looking sincere. Of course, this was also the sentiment of everyone present. They were all skeptical. What kind of calligraphy could it be that harbors such terrifying profound truth of the sword path? Immortal Yuan Dao glanced at everyone and nodded. Fellow brother disciples, let's view inside the hall. He then turned and walked towards the hall. The many higher-ups behind him also entered one after another. When everyone entered Sword One Hall, Yuanjin the immortal also did not hesitate. With a thought, a brilliant beam of light burst out from his long sleeves, then hung in the air and slowly unfolded. The evening rain unfurls the sheer curtains. The crispness of the air resembles that of autumn. Suddenly, 10 ancient characters in small seal script appear before the eyes. The movements are fluid like floating clouds and flowing water, with strokes like iron painting and silver hooks. In the words and phrases, one can sense both the sword's power and its essence. The high-level executives of the sacred land of metaphysics suddenly shrank their pupils. Their gazes were fixed tightly on the suspended calligraphy in midair. Then, their faces changed drastically at the same time. But at this moment, Changxian the Immortal, who had compared the two calligraphy paintings, couldn't help but show a hint of doubt on his face. Could it be that Senior really means that Changming is indeed suitable to cultivate the path of the sword? He was only slightly impressed with Wishwang Lu's calligraphy from before, just finding the mounting exquisite and each stroke powerful, without immersing himself in feeling the profound truth of the sword path within. Now, after this comparison, he realized that the calligraphy brought back by Changming Li, while not yet mounted, the layout and the profoundness of the path of the sword concealed within it are simply incomparable to the one in front of him. In this way, he couldn't help but doubt himself. Could it be that Changming Li is truly more suitable to cultivate the path of the sword? It seems like I misunderstood him before. Changxian the Immortal sighed softly in his heart. However, his rash decision to head to Pond Town to find that Senior was somewhat reckless. It would be good for him to reflect on it. At this moment, the high-level figures of the sacred land of metaphysics. They successively extracted mind and spirit from calligraphy. However, when they came to their senses, every one of them was full of shock. Yuanjin, disciple brother, this calligraphy is really your great fortuitous encounter. I never thought that Senior would actually be here. There is such a terrifying harmony in the way of the sword. It is truly unparalleled. Based on my speculation, if nothing unexpected happens, this Senior should have ascended to the supreme state of Sword Dao. Yuanjin, disciple brother, your luck really amazes us. After experiencing the extraordinary charm of this calligraphy, the senior figures of the sacred land of metaphysics can't help but lament. If they had known that Pond Town had such a supreme being, they should have chosen the path of the sword from the beginning. Why bother practicing the way of symbols and seals or alchemy? Changxian the Immortal, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke up. Everyone, since we have all gathered here today, I would like to discuss some matters with you all. Upon hearing this, everyone cast a glance at each other and nodded in agreement. Elder brother Changxian, please take a seat. Yuanjin the Immortal directly extended the invitation. After all, he is the saint master of the sacred land of metaphysics, so hierarchy must be respected. Changxian the Immortal did not hesitate either. He sat directly at the top. Today, I have 3 matters to discuss with everyone. The first matter is something I mentioned 2 days ago. I intend to appoint Wushuang as the saintest cultivator of our sacred land of metaphysics. As soon as these words were spoken, someone immediately interrupted. Elder brother Chongqian, our sacred land of metaphysics has always only had saint cultivators, and has never established a saintest cultivator position. Are you suggesting abolishing the saint cultivator position? Chongqian the immortal shrugged his mouth and waved his hand, saying, I do not mean to abolish the saint cultivator position. Instead, I want to establish a saintest cultivator position to improve relations with senior from Pond Town. In these 2 days, I am also planning to personally visit this senior. Not to mention whether this senior is the esteemed grandmaster of our sacred land of metaphysics. If we can indeed enhance our relationship with him, it would be the greatest blessing for our sacred land of metaphysics since its founding. Elder brother Chongqian indeed thinks thoughtfully. This is a great fortuitous encounter for our sacred land of metaphysics. Right after he finished speaking, someone immediately nodded in agreement. Chongqian the immortal nodded and continued. The second matter, if we can strengthen our relationship with this senior, I plan to invite him to Mount Taishan during the enfeoffment ceremony to witness Wushuang becoming a saintest cultivator with us. In addition, I need to declare in advance that before this, no one is allowed to go to Pond Town to seek an audience with that senior without permission. Otherwise, there will be severe punishment. If the senior is angered, the cultivation level will be immediately abolished and expelled from the sacred land of metaphysics. Chongqian the immortal's tone was stern and cold, showing no signs of joking. The high-level executives sitting on both sides initially showed joy and couldn't wait to see the appearance of the senior. However, the latter half of Chongqian the immortal's sentence undoubtedly poured cold water on their excitement. It should be noted that in the sacred land of metaphysics, the Saint Master has absolute authority in this cultivation land. The words of the Saint Master are like the word of God. After saying this, Chongqian the immortal's expression slowed down. Then a hint of bitterness appeared on his face. Also, a month later, the young talents of the sacred realm of purple and azure will go to Mount Taishan to hold the biennial martial arts gathering between the 2 major sacred lands. Therefore, during this period, everyone must supervise their disciples to cultivate diligently. Do not be lazy, otherwise, during the martial arts gathering, they will all have to use seclusion as an excuse and must not show up. Hearing this, Qingye, the immortal couldn't help but furrow his brows. Elder brother Chongqian, have you made any progress in your chess skills over the past decade? As soon as this was said, others' faces also slightly changed. They all turned their gaze towards Chongqian the immortal. According to tradition, every 10 years, the 2 great holy grounds within the Great Yan Empire will hold a martial arts competition. At the same time, as a Saint Master of the sacred land of metaphysics, Chongqian the immortal will also have a chess match with the Saint Master of the sacred realm of purple and azure. The loser must give the other party a spiritual artifact of intermediate quality or above, and a 10,000-year elixir. 200 years ago, Chongqian the immortal and the Saint Master of the sacred realm of purple and azure had wins and losses against each other. However, in the past 200 years, for some unknown reason, the Saint Master of the sacred realm of purple and azure has made remarkable progress in chess skills. Every time they compete, Chongqian the immortal is always defeated. It can be imagined that during these 200 years, in nearly 20 chess matches, the sacred land of metaphysics has lost a considerable amount of treasures and elixirs. So every time there is a martial arts competition, the most headache-inducing opponent is always Chongqian the immortal. You see, at their level of expertise, reputation is crucial. This also affects the dignity of the entire sacred land of metaphysics. If one keeps losing at chess, it always feels like being inferior. After pondering for a moment, Chongqian the immortal couldn't help but let out a long sigh. I'm not really concerned about spiritual artifacts of intermediate quality, or above, and the 10,000-year elixir. It's just that I can't stand the triumphant look on Qi Tianzu's face. It's a pity. I've been studying for nearly 200 years, but I still haven't been able to crack the chessboard of 4 dragons spouting water. At this moment, the narrow eyes of Jiuju the Immortal. A glint of light flashed in his narrow eyes. Twirling his beard thoughtfully, he said, "Elder brother Changqian, weren't you planning to pay a visit to that senior?" Hearing this, Changqian the Immortal couldn't help but narrow his eyes. "Junior brother, are you suggesting that I should go seek advice from that senior?" Jiuju the Immortal smirked mysteriously. That senior accomplishments reflect the laws of nature probably doesn't know how many 100,000 years he has lived. Maybe he could easily unravel the chessboard of 4 dragons spouting water. That makes sense. Jiuju junior brother makes a reasonable point. In my estimation, that senior's cultivation level has probably reached the supreme stage. People at his level mostly choose to cultivate and refine their state of mind. Playing chess is one of the best methods for that. After some discussion, the high-level members of the Sacred Land of Metaphysics finally decided that after the 2 major Sacred Land competitions, they will hold a grand ceremony to appoint the Saintess Cultivator. Of course, one of the considerations is that Wushuang's current cultivation level is still low. If she is appointed as the Saintess Cultivator in advance, the talented disciples of the Sacred Realm of Purple and Azure will surely want to challenge her martial arts skills during the competition. If she wins, it's all good. But if she loses, it would not only be a loss of face for the entire Sacred Land of Metaphysics. Secondly, they also need a long time to build a good relationship with the senior in Pawn Town. In their view, supreme beings like this should definitely not be rushed, as it could backfire.